All right. On deck for another Steve Jeltz.
I like what you did there on deck.
That's right.
Ah, so quite a lot to get to in the sports world, um, and I guess we'll lead off with something not Philly sports related, but Aaron Rodgers, good old psychoactive plan himself, makes it four. What was it? 4 plays into his
Yeah, yeah,
Jets career.
he was 0 for 1 successfully, more unsuccessfully, whichever way you want to phrase that. And yeah, out of the game, and definitely not returning. As we record this, the game's still going on, but who knows? Is this season ending? Is it more than one game? I don't know.
I'm tempted to believe it's going to be torn ligaments in his ankle. If I had to guess, they said X-rays were negative, so there's no broken bones, which, depending upon how you look at it, is good or bad because he was in a walking boot. Now, I would imagine it's not an Achilles, which is good for him and for the Jets, because if it was an Achilles, he's definitely done for the season.
Yeah, yeah, we saw that already with J.K. Dobbins of the Ravens, which sucks. I mean, look, I don't care. Look, we can sit here all day long and bash. We bash the Cowboys, we bash teams we don't like, whatever. As a football fan, and particularly as anyone that may even not follow a team, but just a fantasy football fan, that sucks.
Yeah,
It's like you're already like, you know, kicked down the stairs uh, based off one guy that gets a season-ending injury.
right.
It's not fun.
And you know, not on the same team, but on between my two teams with in week 1, lost J.K. Dobbins, lost Aaron Rodgers,
Yeah,
and Travis Kelce was out for the first week.
yeah.
So apparently
It's
I'm the kiss of death.
Yeah, so you
Which,
want to run down your roster, so you might want to avoid these players.
yeah. Well, let's see. And then all right, so if we go that route though, so even it seems like even just being on my team is bad luck because I've got DeAndre Swift who scored all of 1.3 points for the Eagles, didn't get
Yeah,
used much. Um, you know, uh, I've got a couple players that did okay, but by and large, man, my team has massively underperformed. Both my teams have massively underperformed.
and it'll
Um,
turn around. That's the world of fantasy football. You've
yeah.
done it for enough years to see how that goes.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes you just have a bad week, and then the next week you score 3 times as many points. It's weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious on. I know we'll get into this more long form, but yeah, the Eagles' rushing game was really kind of um, I don't know, kind of put in check, I guess. Didn't see a whole lot from Hurts really, and really didn't see a whole lot from anyone other than Kenny G himself.
I I'm going to be measured in my response because it is week 1. They're still knocking the rust off. Got a brand new offensive coordinator. Jalen Hurts did not look like himself. And I have a feeling it's a matter of number one, all right, you're playing against Bill Belichick, right?
Hmm.
Bill Belichick is one of the best defensive minds that football has ever seen. He had how many months to prepare for the Eagles, right?
Oh, since February. Yep.
And you've got a brand new offensive coordinator and you've got new pieces here and there on the offense. Not as many as on the defense, but you've got a lot of new pieces. Some rust, some inconsistency is bound to happen, but it looked like Brian Johnson, the offensive coordinator, was calling a preseason game during this game. He didn't mix it up a lot. It was a very vanilla offense. Jalen Hurts was going with his first reads on a lot of the plays. Didn't throw a pass over 15 or didn't complete a pass over 15 yards
Hmm.
for the first time in I I don't want to say his career, but it's not often that he has a game where he doesn't complete a pass over 15 yards. Chunk plays were a huge part of their offense last year, and it's going to be again this year if they end up being successful. But Brian Johnson has to do a better job at calling the plays, mixing up the running backs. We've got 4 capable running backs. Granted, Rashad Penny, for some reason, was not on the roster.
Yeah, I didn't know
not
what
on
that
the
was
active
about.
roster.
Yeah.
So, and I can't – I don't understand signing him and then not having him active on game day. That doesn't make any sense. So, hopefully what we'll see on Thursday, maybe they were kind of – I don't know, maybe they were trying to play with an eye towards Thursday. I don't have a good answer for you as far as why they looked as bad as they did on Sunday, besides the weather. Maybe Brian Johnson was calling
Right.
it conservatively because of the weather, because the weather was shit. But even then, you would think you would mix it up with the runs, and DeAndre Swift did not get carries.
No, and
So
not only that, mix it up with the runs. You've got at least, let's take Penny out of the equation. Okay, whatever. There's a reason why he's shelved, whatever. But you've got Boston Scott, you've got Kenny Gainwell, and you've got DeAndre Swift. And like as you mentioned, Swift does nothing. Boston Scott's very minimal as well. Kenny Gainwell's getting the lion's share, and even then he doesn't really do a whole lot. My thing too is though in the weather, you tend to look at your using those running backs, and you tend to do a lot of tosses maybe to your tight end. I guess who barely registers any targets at all.
exactly, yeah. So Dallas Goedert, another member of my team, by the way, zero catches for obviously 0 yards, a non-factor. Jalen was forcing the ball to his first reads almost every play that he was throwing the ball. There were multiple instances where Dallas Goedert was wide open and they were showing it on the telestrator. There was the New England defensive line and linebackers, the rushers were getting pressure. They sacked him. They
huge.
sacked him a few times. They were getting a lot of pressure. There was a lot that went wrong offensively and defensively, but I don't know, man. And then you have he is so frustrating because he's so good, but then he does stupid shit like miss an extra point and then hit 50-yard plus field goals.
Yeah, exactly.
So Jake Elliott and big play Slay coming up huge.
Yep.
And even Jalen on that pass to Devontae Smith for the touchdown in the first quarter, beautiful. Throws it right where it needs to be.
Oh yeah, threads the needle. Devontae, catches the line. He stays in bounds. It was awesome.
Right. Fantastic catch. And hell, even the pass to AJ that ended up being called out of bounds. It could have gone either way. It seems like maybe it was the right call. I don't know. I thought it was a catch, but I understood the whole double clutch in the ball.
I'm just glad that call was called the same way as a call toward the end of the game where there was a similar situation. Patriots receiver, and I can't remember his name. I'm sorry, but catches the ball. Same thing. Doesn't get 2 feet in bounds, and they basically have to review it, whatever. And I'm just glad it was called the same way.
Yeah,
that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just glad it was called the same way.
So now what I do, we've talked pretty much exclusively about the negatives. There were a couple positives, and I've got the stats right here that I wanted to talk about. So game 1 of the season, obviously, Jalen Carter, the rookie phenom, 6 pressures and a sack on 32 rushes in his NFL debut. Jordan Davis, 6 tackles, 1 sack, a forced fumble, and 3 pressures.
Yeah.
How much different does Jordan Davis look than he did last year?
Yeah, I know. He was awesome. And dude, the aforementioned Jalen Carter, my goodness, talking about this guy has potential to be, and all I'm going to call this in baseball terms, rookie of the year.
Yep.
I mean, that looks so good for him. That was definitely a highlight. And no, you're right. Jordan Davis just looked awesome.
Yeah.
Stud. I mean,
And even Fletch.
Oh yeah, dude, I was going to say that. So Fletcher Cox, especially, and I can't remember, was a pretty pivotal part where he came in and really shut him on a 3rd and 4th down, and it just looked really, really good. He looked like Fletcher Cox of old. Of course, he was a bit gassed toward the end, but
Yeah. But that's the thing. Now that we've got, and that's where Fletcher Cox has kind of seemed like he was almost fading the last few years, but because he's not meant to be playing as
no,
many downs as
no,
he was playing. So you keep him fresh and you can keep throwing fastballs at the offense, then who knows where it could go as the team develops. Because
yeah.
again, Sean Desai, his first game as defensive coordinator,
And let's not kid ourselves
regular
here.
season.
Let's go back to Fletcher Cox's career here. This dude has basically played just about every single game of his career outside of 1 or 2 here and there, and in the span of the last 10 plus years. And we're talking that this is a span of 174 regular season games on top of about a dozen or so, roughly, playoff games. So this dude's had a lot of wear and tear. I mean,
And now speaking of wear and tear, we do have a little bit of a concern. We've got James Bradbury got it banged up.
yeah,
You know,
he's in concussion protocol, correct?
yes, I think he's in concussion protocol. Fletcher Cox was a little bit dinged up, but the big one is Nakobe Dean, who's set to
Yeah,
miss at least 1 week, possibly more, with a foot injury. So hopefully, he recovers quickly. We went out and signed a guy that was a former 1st-round pick to our practice squad. We still have Nicholas Morrow, who I can imagine would be elevated from the practice squad. Same thing with this dude is probably once he gets up to speed will be elevated from the practice
yeah. Was
squad.
it Rashawn Evans? Is that who it was?
I believe so. Let me double check. I've got it.
Yeah. I think that's what it was. I'll be honest with you. I don't know much about the guy other than what you just said with the former 1st-round pick. But yeah, no, they've got some depth, so I'm not terribly worried yet. But it is worrisome, with especially how long is Dean going to be out, and then what are you going to get from what you're basically calling from the practice squad? So
Yeah. So this is Rashawn Evans. He was the 22nd player taken in the 2018 draft. Started 50 games over 4 seasons for the Titans. Spent last season with the Falcons, starting all 17 games. He had 159 tackles, 2 sacks, and 4 pass breakups. He was the 45th ranked linebacker out of 60 that played at least 500 snaps.
okay, so
So,
he's bottom tier, but here's the thing: he showed up and suited up every single day.
right.
So I'm gonna give him that.
Yeah. I'll
Something to be said for showing up.
right. The most important ability is availability.
Mm-hmm.
So
Amen. No, as far as other positives, hey, I know this sounds funny, but I do like Elliott being able to bang all those long field goals. That's certainly helpful. Um, look, Hurts is Hurts. He's gonna come into it. I mean, I have all the faith in the world in him.
oh yeah.
The Patriots defense just looked that good at times, and it's tough whenever you're playing a tough D. It's tough to work around that. So we can counter misgivings on the Eagles new offensive coordinator and all this, that, and everything. But let's just not kid ourselves here. The Patriots D did look good, so I give them that because there's a lot of young guys there on that entire team. And look, I will say this: I thought Mac Jones looked pretty decent too. On the other side of the ball, at times he was quick. He was completing a lot of passes. The thing with the Patriots is, other than Ramondre, I don't know that they have a whole lot of weapons to work with. I mean, Hunter Henry's
So
a very capable tight end, but
they've got Devontae Parker, who's their top tight end or their top
yeah,
receiver, and he was out.
I knew he
Their
was out.
second
Yeah,
receiver was out. So we were basically playing a lot of their and their offensive line was a makeshift offensive line. It was all rookies. That's what concerns me. What concerns me is that offense was ripe for the picking. That offensive line was a bunch of rookies and untested players. They acquitted themselves incredibly well. Ramondre Stevens ran well. Mac Jones picked apart that team, picked apart our defense. And that's what's scary to me because Mac Jones, to this point, had never really shown, at least in the pros, had never really shown that before.
No, he's very
And
middling.
so that's where I get scared because, yeah, we talk about, okay, the defensive line, Carter and Davis played well, Fletch played well, but there was, man, when Reed Blankenship came out for a little bit, which I haven't seen an update on him. I don't know. I'm assuming he's okay because he came back in. Um, Job played well in replacing Bradbury, but man, Mac Jones just kind of picked us apart,
Yeah.
and that's scary to me because again, I maybe this is going to be a season. Maybe he has a jump like Jalen did, but he's never shown that
No,
that
and
to us before.
and it was cool. They did go back and they showed that 2018 Alabama quarterbacks photo. It was Mac Jones, Tua, and Jalen. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah,
You kind of you kind of forget that because it seems like so long ago, and real reality is only 5 years ago.
yeah.
So it's kind of neat to see that.
And then meanwhile, Jalen has the worst day of all three of them yesterday.
Dude, Tua goes out of his mind, and goes for almost 500 yards. Of course,
Yeah.
like 2/3 of that or whatever was to friggin' Tyreek Hill. But
And don't get me wrong, I'm not talking trash on Jalen. I believe in him 100%. I'm sure he's going to turn it around, and I still have faith that we're going to do all right this year. But it's just a little bit disconcerting knowing that we're playing on Thursday this week. Now we have a short turnaround coming off a game where we didn't look great. Thank God we're playing against primetime Kirk Cousins because I don't know if we're beating regular Kirk Cousins.
yeah, we're like
Although,
1 p.m. Kirk Cousins versus 8 p.m. Kirk Cousins are two different animals.
well, that's because the Geritol kicks in
Yeah.
when he's playing
Yeah.
that late.
Yeah.
So, but no, I mean, because look, the Vikings either didn't look good or the Bucks are a lot better than people thought because even he threw for 300 some yards, Kirk did, against the Bucks.
Yeah, Justin
And
Jefferson and Addison the rookie, showed up, had a touchdown himself.
yeah, and they still lost to the Bucks down in Tampa. So,
I think you and I have talked about this though. Buccaneers. Are you going to get good Baker or bad Baker? And they ran into good Baker.
yeah.
You know,
But let's see, what was Baker's final stat line in that game? Was he actually good Baker or was he just adequate Baker?
let's see.
Go to the box score here.
Yeah, I'm going to throw up Pro Football Reference that they've already updated for that. I mean, he was completed over 60% of his passes, 173 yards. So not a whole lot of game that way. QBR of 61.8, which is in line with his career, basically. I mean,
two touchdowns, no interceptions, 173 yards, and a 60+ completion percentage. You can't ask for much more than that.
No, I mean he didn't. It's not like a fantastic line, but I mean it's in line with his best season, which was in 2020, where he went for 3,500 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 8 picks.
Right,
which isn't terrible. I mean, if you really think about it. I mean,
and really looking at these stat lines, so the Bucks had So Minnesota actually outgained them 369 yards to 242. 328 through the air, only 41 on the ground. So, and it was an average of 6 yards per play for Minnesota, 4 for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, Minnesota's all air game. They've got the rookie running back in Madison. I don't know. He got a touchdown too, though, so I don't know how that's going to all play out. But
Right.
Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is an arm guy. That whole any offense he'll ever run is going to be, not driven on the run. So
Right.
especially
Well,
whenever you have Justin Jefferson, the guy can do everything.
and here's your two big telling stats, right? So total turnovers, Minnesota had 3, Tampa had none.
Wow. Yep. There you
So
go. That's it.
there, and then Minnesota had 6 penalties against them, Tampa had 3.
Yep. That's it.
So
Yep.
you lose the turnover battle, you lose the game.
Yep. Lose turnover battle, and then just the penalties alone. I mean, even when
Right.
you have the ball or whatever, if you're, I don't know, it's yeah. Actually, you know what too? And we'll I know, kind of stay on the football topic too, real quick too. I know we dabble around other sports. Let's not kid ourselves here. How about the Rams?
I did not pay attention to the Rams game.
Click the. I'm curious. I'm just curious. Pull that score real quick. It's crazy. I was shocked
Let's see here.
because this is one that I was just kind of blown away on.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
30-13.
Did you see that
against
coming?
Seattle?
Yeah, I know. Did you see that
No,
coming?
I didn't see that. I didn't see this one coming at all. So let's take a look. So, wow, and Stafford does that with no touchdown passes?
Dude, I'm telling you, it's a weird one, right?
Geno Smith. Ooh. Geno not looking too hot.
No, he definitely. If you look for any kind of signs of regression, we
Yeah.
better snap back out of it in week 2 because
Yeah, he better remember to write back.
isn't that
Let's see.
crazy though? That was there was a
Holy
few games like
shit.
that. The Cleveland Cincinnati game was another one.
Dude, the Cleveland Cincinnati game threw me for a loop. Now, let's look at this one. So here's one where no turnovers on either team. Seattle actually had 2 sacks against LA. Both teams had 7 penalties, but LA had almost double the time of possession.
Yep.
There was 39 minutes and 23 seconds to 20 minutes and 37 seconds.
They basically took a page out of the Eagles playbook. Just
Right.
control the ball.
Right.
That's it.
It's in the average yards per play was only 5 to 4. So it's not like they were getting these huge chunk plays and they were doing this and doing that. Seattle could not throw the ball. They
Yeah.
had 95 yards passing and 85 yards rushing.
Yeah.
So that's scary. Now, my immediate thought is how many drops did they have? Did the receivers have?
Mm,
And that's what I don't see, like, because I'm just on the NFL. I'm on the NFL website, so it's
right.
not
Right.
telling me about drops. It's not
Yeah. Yeah.
telling
You're
me.
not getting all the. Yeah.
So that would be worth a dive to see, like, oh well, okay, you know, half or 3/4 of Geno's incompletions were drops, something like that. But if he's just legit not hitting his receivers, oof, I
I'm
don't know,
looking up
man.
real quick. I just threw up their DK Metcalf's, obviously number 1 receiver up there for the Seahawks, and his catch percentage, which is basically receptions divided by targets, which does not mean necessarily drops. It's just
Right.
whatever. We know that, but it's in line with his career. He was targeted 5 times, caught 3 balls yesterday. Let's see who's else up there.
Solid 60%.
So Lockett was targeted 4 times, caught twice. So I think it's just more of a matter of, I don't know. I'd really have to see these plays, but it's either a combination of drops or Geno just has no idea where his receivers are.
Right. And back to your point on Dallas Goddard from our game, targeted once.
Yeah, I knew it was minimal. And there was a couple plays they showed it on the like you said, the telestrator or the replays where Goddard would be like wide open, basically no one around him for 5 to 7 yards, and like basically with the arms up, like throw me the ball and nothing. It's I don't know. To me, if you're playing in the rain, you run those real short routes, 8-10 yard. Look for your tight end. I don't know.
Right.
I just did that a
and that's the
lot
thing.
playing video games.
I didn't expect, I'm not expecting 70-yard bombs. I'm
No,
not expecting because the field was not. They have field turf, so it's not like it was like it's not like you're playing on muddy grass, but it's still not the best track to go on. So I'm not expecting it to be a track meet. I'm not expecting it to be, the greatest show on turf where we're throwing for each side's throwing for 400 yards. But I expected more than what we did. Um, so hopefully the offensive coordinator Brian Johnson figures it out because he's got to make Jalen more comfortable because it was just obvious he was not comfortable running that offense, or at least the plays
no,
called.
no, not at all. All right. Out of football for now, we'll definitely hit that hard again because now that we're deep in the season, this is going to be. I say deep in the season. We're just past week 1. To me, that's
Yeah,
deep because it started.
yeah,
So we're deep in it. No. Let's talk a little Phillies. Phillies have kind of scuttled a little bit here lately, but they split this doubleheader today with Atlanta. Heck of a first game. Kind of sad the way it finished. Alvarado has looked rough, and I don't know what the fix is there. I don't know if he's hurt again, but he's had a couple of 2-3 games now where he just hasn't looked good and is coughing it up, and that's kind of worrisome because there's not a whole lot of consistency in the bullpen really. So don't know what we're going to get here as the season finishes up and kind of in a pivotal stretch. So
right.
kind of concerning. Harper hits that tying home run in the 9th, and of course gets, like I said, gets coughed up. But no, they're killing the ball. Trey continues to be absolutely on another planet, so on fire that it's ridiculous. And you and I kind of chatted about this through text. Look, maybe the way to go is to praise your players that are underperforming, because you look at his stat line since that's happened, and it is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, the guy's basically hit more home runs plus like 5 or 6 more than he had the entire first part of the year,
Right.
which is insane. In a way shorter amount of, you know, he's just, I don't know. Maybe that's what you do. Maybe you don't be, like you said, Negadelphia.
Right. That's the thing, man. It's mental health. And I feel like I've mentioned this a couple times recently on different episodes, but I think maybe people are finally realizing that it's not a sign of weakness, that it's to have mental health issues is to be human. And instead of trying to treat it like, oh, you need to man up, or oh, you need to do this, or you need to do that, they're starting to treat it as a real thing. And they're starting to, imagine this, treat athletes like humans instead of robots,
Oh, wait, they have
or
feelings? Huh.
yeah, they have feelings too. They may be making a shit ton more money than us, and that's another that's. But look, here's the thing: don't bitch to me that athletes are making the amount of money that they're making, and say, "Oh, with that amount of money, I would be, I would never be depressed." Because look, you know what? It's a chemical imbalance. It's not a choice. It's not a, oh, I've got $500 million in the bank. Yes, you know what? Does it make certain things easier? Fuck yes. Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
However, it doesn't change your brain chemistry. So until the brain chemistry gets right and until everything else gets right, doesn't matter how many, your brain doesn't care. Your brain chemistry does not care how much money you have in the bank.
Exactly.
It's being balanced and regulated. So anyway, now that I'm off my
No,
soapbox.
and no, and I kind of wanted to say this too. You're talking about the money part of it. It's you end up with cases. Case in point, like Andre Rison. And there's a 30 for 30 on him. It's flat out called broke. So yeah, all the money in the world could make you happy, whatever. But then you make bad decisions, you do whatever it is, and you make those bad decisions typically because you're just not. The money doesn't make you happy.
Right.
So I mean, that's not everything. So no, kudos to the Philly fan base for doing the ovation for Trey, because that's turned him up, and it's kind of propelled the Phillies from a spot where they were 2-3 games out from the wild card race. They were kind of hovering that line, and now I think they're 4-ish games in the up on it. So look, they were never going to win the division.
Right.
Let's not kid ourselves here. Atlanta's is ridiculous, but but I think they can be in prime position to take the first wild card spot if they continue the way they are, which is pretty awesome.
Right. No, I agree.
I know you had some other thoughts that you wanted to kind of go off of. So what you got?
So most of my stuff is based around hockey. And I know you had a question for me on hockey, so I'll let you lead off with that, and then we can get into my other
Yeah,
thoughts and that conversation.
yeah. I don't follow the Flyers nearly like you do. Just barely, kind of on the surface. It's just not my sport, and never really has been. But I know enough to be dangerous, and so I still read and try to keep myself kind of informed on what's going on, particularly with the Flyers. But I saw an article come through on a Philly sports blog, um, and I can't remember the blog that it was on, but basically it was saying that the Flyers should take and kind of dip the toe in the water on trying to get Phil Kessel. And I'm curious to see your thoughts on this one.
I disagree. And not because of a skill level issue or that I think he's a bad player. He's a good player. He's been a pretty great player for a long time now. But that is an old Flyers move. They're trying to go in a new direction right now and build around youth and see what their young players have and build a sustainable team. Now, I understand a move like that if you're below the salary threshold, but from where they're at now, it doesn't make any sense. You're not going to hear, he's not going to turn this group of players into a Stanley Cup championship caliber team. If you want to bring him in for veteran leadership, okay, there could be a case to be made for that. But I don't want to see them start loading up with, like you can pick names over the years that we brought in: Paul Coffey, Tony Amani, Joel Otto. These guys that were perennial all stars had names, name recognition, and so Ed Snyder would go out and sign them all, and then they would come to Philly, and not that they would all not live up to what they used to be, but we were getting them in the twilight of their career. We were paying them for their past achievements. They weren't the ones who were going to push us over the edge to be a championship team. Um, and I guess Paul Coffey's not really a name that fits in there because he played for a while for us and played some pretty good hockey for us. But that's the kind of player that they used to go after all the time,
Right.
and it failed them. So they're trying to go in a new direction. So let's not fall into the old ways again. Let's move forward. Let's see what our young guys can do. If you want to sign low risk, high reward young players to give them a shot, see what they can do, I'm all for it. Let's go. Bring back Ghost. Hell, let's see him on the blue line again. There's other players. Nolan Patrick, who we traded away. He was having issues and with migraines and such, and and maybe if he's ready to play again, let's bring him back because he's been DFA'd. So let's bring him back in a professional tryout. There's so many players you could do that kind of stuff with that are young. Let's do that. Give the young guys a shot, but don't go all in on an older guy that, again, unless you need to, number one, reach the salary floor, which we don't have a problem with, or number two, you want the veteran leadership. Okay, bring in one guy or two guys.
Yeah. And like I said, I saw that kind of as reading on the periphery, and it's like you look at the stat wise, and it's like, oh yeah, that would be great. But I agree completely with what you're saying. It's like it's time to make a change in the mindset mentality of how you're going to run this, based on the fact that there really hasn't been a recent history of much anything great. So it's time to kind of take that new direction. I do like the go for the youth movement on this one, and don't try to fall in the same trap that they had been just based on what you just said. Yeah, so I on the surface it's like, oh yeah, that'd be cool. Let's bring him in, and then it's like, I don't know. No, let's not do that.
Yeah, because the other thing too is you figure at this point, if you go out and you make these band-aid signings and you sign a Phil Kessel and you sign some other players that are good but not great, and you're still just stifling the youth movement. Great. So what happens? You make the 8th seed in the playoffs. And granted, once you get into the playoffs, anything can happen. That's going to screw up your draft positioning.
Yep.
The whole idea at this point is to restock the farm system because the cupboards are bare. You restock the farm system, you restock your team, you get good players. Look, I hated it when the Penguins tanked and they went full tank mode and tanked for multiple years and ended up getting Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and other players that basically resurrected their franchise and led to multiple Stanley Cups. But at the end of the day, that's what they needed to do because they were treading water. Making the playoffs or being just on the outside of the playoffs, it keeps you in mediocrity. You need to straight up suck for several years in order to rebuild your franchise.
Right.
But that brings me to another situation the Flyers are facing. And you may or may not have an opinion on this, but I want to catch you or I want to see what you think about this.
Okay.
So the Flyers have been embroiled in an issue with one of their young goalies that they drafted, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Let me see what his name is. So Ivan Fedotov, right? He is one of the he's one of the top international goalies. They say that he's the best goalie that's not in the NHL, right? And the Flyers own his NHL rights. They signed him to a contract. He has an NHL contract now. The International Ice Hockey Foundation or Federation, whatever it is, ruled that the Flyers own his rights. And Russia won't let him leave.
Oh, great. So it's like a national player type thing?
Uh-huh.
Oh,
So last year he had to serve, I think, a 2 or 3 year hitch in the Russian army.
right.
This is his first year after that. And instead of letting him go to come play for the Flyers, Russia's saying, we don't recognize that contract. And are basically forcing him without saying they're forcing him to play in the KHL. And
Ugh.
he's like, oh, yes, I want to play in the KHL. Because obviously he doesn't want his loved ones to be shot.
Right.
So flash forward to the draft. Well, this all started unraveling. It's been going for years now. They've been fighting this battle. The Flyers this year took a player in the draft who is a Russian forward. I believe it's Matt. God damn it, I can't. It's Mitchell. Fucking why can't I say his name? Matvey Michkov. I just can't talk today.
That's all good.
So he's a Russian player, and he's playing for Sochi in the KHL. And dude, he he was originally with SKA St. Petersburg. He's now been loaned to Sochi because he wasn't getting playing time.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem is, this is again where he's being forced to play in Russia. He says he wants to play for the Flyers. He was at the draft. Well, he's been drafted, and now who knows when he's going to come over here.
Yeah,
He's a
and
separate issue because there's been word coming out about him being just like a gigantic piece of shit.
right.
But it seems like Russia's starting to just do whatever they want as far as keeping players from coming to the NHL.
I was going to say, yeah, because I know that, and I kind of remember this though, over the years, though, this kind of being a problem with foreign players finding a really difficult way to try to get over. And I think you saw this a lot with Cuban baseball players.
Mhm.
Like they would have to defect completely to be able to come play in Major League Baseball. So I don't think this is anything new. Um, the thing that's crazy though is that the part you said they're not honoring the contract,
Right.
which I mean really, I mean I don't know what the legality part of that is. There's no world council for that. I don't, you know what I
Right.
mean? I don't, but it's still, sports has historically, even on the paper side of it, has operated on this trust, this handshake, this whatever agreement. It's like, well, yeah, you signed the rights to this 16-year-old player from the Dominican Republic. They eventually come over and play. I mean, that's happened for years with baseball. So you just kind of would assume that would happen anywhere else. You know, it's just part of what that whole young international signing thing is. I don't know. It's weird. It's really weird. You know, it's almost, I almost, I feel bad for the players that have more ahead than I do for the any team involved.
Well, and here's the thing. So basically the IIHF, and let me get the actual, so it's the International Ice Hockey Federation. So they are the ones, they're essentially, any kind of World Cup of hockey, anything like that, they make the rulings, they hand down sanctions, they punish teams, they ban teams and players and stuff. So basically Russia is just completely flouting the rules and telling them like, "Hey, you know what? Fuck you. We're going to do what we want to do. Go ahead and punish us. See what happens."
Mm,
And so they're saying that any international the CKSA, which is the what is it? It translates to, where is it? CSKA. It's the um Central Sports Club of the Army. It's basically the Russian army hockey team. Um, so they're getting sanctions against them. The player gets banned from international competition, but they don't care. And
mm.
so my question is, at what point does the NHL just say, you know what? Fuck it. We're not drafting anybody from Russia anymore.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. That the yeah. That not only that, um, but here's the other thing that I think is weird. This has historically gone on for a long time, where you have these guys being drafted, like I said, being drafted from other countries, whatever. But let's say talk for the Olympics, right? So they can play professionally in the United States. But guess what happens come Olympic time? They play for their home country, right? I mean, that's historically happened for a
Right.
long time. Honestly, like, wouldn't that be your only hang up? Like, oh, I'm worried they're going to get hurt for our national competitions, blah, 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 whatever, which only happen every so often. I don't know. It's just weird. You know, it's almost like it's a, we're doing, like you just said, like we're doing this because we can,
Right.
and no one's going to stop us.
It's what it reeks of to me, and we don't do politics on this show, but it's more or less, these are Russian players. Fuck the United States. We're going to keep our players. Now, obviously, guys like Ovechkin, Yager, etc., have already made their bones and are kind of untouchable. so they're allowed to do what they want. But these young guys, they're like, no, you're going to stay and play for Mother Russia, and that's
Hmm.
how it's going to be. And so I just wonder when the NHL has enough and says, "Fuck it, we're not going to play this game with you anymore."
Or, and here's the thing too, because you know how sanctioning bodies of sports are, because we all love our Roger Goodells and those type of guys. Um, maybe the actual organizations don't care, and they'll leave it to the teams to decide: is it worth wasting your draft pick on somebody that you might not ever get?
Right. Well, no, and that's the thing. I don't necessarily mean like Gary Bettman, because Gary Bettman's a spineless piece of shit. But my thing is, when will the teams? Do you think it'll get to the
Oh,
point
figure
where
it
the
out.
teams
Right,
just decide, like, look, this shit's not worth it
right,
anymore.
right.
We're just wasting draft picks.
Actually, that's another conversation for another day. What commissioner do you actually like?
I'll tell you what. What I did like was, now Mike Tirico's been getting a lot of backlash, and Chris Collinsworth getting a lot of backlash for calling that game against the Chiefs and Detroit game. I did like Mike Tirico going in on Goodell over sports gambling and saying, so, the NFL is doing a lot of advertising with gambling and getting involved with gambling, and yet you're suspending all of your players because they're gambling. So what's going on there? And Roger Goodell was so fucking pissed, and you could tell he just did not. He didn't give an answer. He was just like, it was a non-answer, just stuttering and stumbling over his words like a fucking moron. And it was crazy. Like, I loved it. I loved that Mike Tirico went after him on
And
that.
he should have, and
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's ridiculous. Like, um, the whole sport, look, I realize in some cases it's bad. Especially gets to the point of like throwing the game. But look, that's a whole nother set of it. But if you're just placing like a bet on like other teams that aren't even involved, like a regular human being, come on. Like
right.
that's just, you know,
I mean, and look, let's not be stupid. Like, you should be smart enough to not do that shit at your team facilities. But come on, man. As long as
yeah,
you're not betting on anything that's going to fuck up your team, you know, like, why is it an issue?
yeah, yeah,
Like, oh,
exactly.
we don't want the NFL to be associated with gambling, but every single fucking ad is going to be about gambling.
Yeah, no, and the it's just getting bigger. More states are opening up to it especially for the online aspect of it. Like that's obviously where all that's going to now. Used to obviously not be that way, but now it's just this whole thing, and here's what's even crazier is that they talk about this. Yet we've already mentioned fantasy football on here. Look, fantasy football has a whole nother slew of gambling. It's just run kind of under the radar because people do it themselves. There's really any, you know, unless you go to a pay to play like public league or whatever, like
Right.
that's something that people have done themselves. It's a whole nother thing that's not monitored really. And these guys are doing their own leagues. Like, come on, like the guy just has to get with the 21st century, right? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
All I can say is though, actually, you can say it.
I've got one more thing that I
Okay.
want to talk about before we
Before we say that,
yes.
okay.
So apparently, speaking of Flyers and their goalies, apparently Carter Hart may be fucked real soon, and that may have major implications for the Flyers and their process going forward.
Oh yeah. No, I did see a little bit about this. Yeah, please elaborate because
So
yeah.
there is and I'm trying to find the most current article on it so I can make sure I'm giving the absolute best information. Um, but apparently, 5 members of the 2018 Canada World Juniors hockey team sexually assaulted a woman in a hotel room after a Hockey Canada fundraising gala. Now, those 5 players are have blacked out their social media, or at least their Instagrams, and one of them being Carter Hart. So I'm trying to find out. Let's see here. Oh, shit. So, and here we go. Is that 5 players will face NHL suspensions? So the 5 players that they're talking about that are currently in the NHL is Carter Hart, Jake Bean, Cale Clegg, Colton Point, and Taylor Radish. Um, they're also saying that 4 other players, Cale Makar, Victor Met, Connor Timmins, Sam Steele, and Jonah Gadovich, have also been implicated. So there's a lot of players that are involved in this, and it could have some major implications for players going forward. And especially, the Flyers when that's their starting goalie, their
Yeah, I was
number
gonna
one
say
goalie,
that's
the guy
their guy. Yeah,
that they were talking about moving on from. So maybe that explains why nobody wanted to bite on Carter Hart, because there was all kinds of rumors that the Flyers were trying to trade Carter Hart this offseason and go, because he's not going to, they don't want to waste his best years in this rebuilding process. So it's just really, it's gross, man. It's just disgusting that this, I don't really have words, because this is more important than the Eagles not playing well in week 1. This is more important than the Phillies blowing a lead. This is more important than the fact that the Sixers are a fucking dumpster fire of a franchise. This is more important than the Flyers and whatever happens this season. This is somebody's life that was ruined by these entitled, rich little. I don't want to say too. I don't want to be too much of a dick. If you got money, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter who you
yeah,
step on. It doesn't matter who you hurt. Getting where you want to go.
yeah. I don't know
And
much about the story, but yeah, this doesn't sound good, especially with the blacked out social media stuff already. It's yeah, don't yeah. I don't know.
so, but on that note, I do want to close this down with actually 2 statements. So, number 1, of course, fuck Dallas, but number 2, fuck rapists.